The Miami Dolphins have been one of the more disappointing teams the past couple years, because with an offensive genius and loads of talents, the Miami Dolphins have failed to consistently make a deep playoff run. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Miami Dolphins and why I am personally pessimistic about the future of this team. So the way I'm going to be breaking down this Miami Dolphins team is we're going to be breaking it up into 3 different segments. We're going to start off by talking about some of the positive things going for this Miami Dolphins team. And then after that, we'll talk about some of the negative things. These are things that are not necessarily within their control, but maybe some of them are. And then at the very end of the video, I'll give you guys a bit of a prediction as to what I personally think this Miami Dolphins team is going to do in 2024. So as I said earlier, we're going to start off by talking about some of the positive things going for this Miami Dolphins team. And I think the biggest compliment that I can give this Dolphins team is by saying that this is one of the more talented teams within the NFL. We'll start off with the offense because that is kind of what this Dolphins team has become known for. We'll start off with Tua Tagovailoa, who I think is a very interesting quarterback in the NFL. Let me get this out of the way. I do think Tua is a borderline, maybe top 10 quarterback. I think if he's outside of your top 12, then I think you're sadly mistaken, because I do think Tua is extremely good. My whole issue with Tua and why I personally have a hard time moving him anywhere higher than like top 7, is because he's become a very system-reliant quarterback with Mike McDaniel. Now, you can take that one of 2 ways. You can take that as either a negative and a hit on Tua as a quarterback by saying that Tua isn't anything without Mike McDaniel, or you could take it as a compliment to Tua because he's become a master of the Mike McDaniel system. The Mike McDaniel system is extremely based on timing, precision, accuracy, and anticipation. And Tua has got those things down to a T. But the biggest issue with that is that when the system doesn't work, when the play call doesn't work to perfection, you gotta make a play. And unfortunately, Tua just has not been able to do so. You look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who yes, has one of the greatest play callers in Andy Reid on his sideline. And he has also become a master of that craft. Patrick Mahomes may know the Andy Reid system better than Andy Reid. But the difference between a guy like Tua and Patrick Mahomes is when the play breaks down for Patrick Mahomes, he goes out there and makes a play. Whereas for Tua, when the play breaks down and the offensive scheme isn't working, Tua typically doesn't really do a whole lot to fix it. And that's a huge compliment to the coaching staff. The fact that this team has been able to get that far with a quarterback who hasn't necessarily shown the ability to play outside of the system is a pretty good compliment to both Tua for knowing how to work the system perfectly, and of course Mike McDaniel. So again, when I say that Tua has become a master of the system, don't necessarily take that as a massive hit on Tua. Take that more as a compliment, and as something that he could potentially work on to become a little bit better outside of the system. However, outside of Tua, obviously this team has a bunch more talent. Let's talk about the running backs, the receivers, and the rest of the offense. Running back wise, you have a trio of some really fun and extremely athletic running backs. Raheem Mostert is standing the test of time. He is a touchdown machine. Then alongside him, you have some speedsters in guys like Devon Achane and Jalen Wright. I will say this, I didn't really love the Miami Dolphins draft because I did think they get talented players, but I thought that they targeted guys in positions that they didn't really have to target. For example, Jalen Wright, you already had 2 running backs, and if you're going to draft Jalen Wright, you ideally want to put him in a system that doesn't already have explosive backs. I thought Miami would have been smarter to look for some more like physical, big, broadly style running backs, but Jalen Wright is awesome, so I kind of get it. But I don't know, I would have just preferred them to go after somebody else who maybe is a bit more of a brawler style. Your wide receivers are awesome with guys like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Odell Beckham. Then behind them, you obviously have guys like Braxton Berrios, Malik Washington, and some other studs. I don't really have to go into too much detail about this receiving core because we all know how great Tyreek, Jalen, and Odell have become in this league. Tyreek Hill is one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the NFL, and likely will continue to win some awards moving forward. Your tight end position is interesting with guys like Jonnu Smith, Durham Smythe, Julian Hill. I don't really know who's going to be the starter between Durham and Jonnu. If I had to guess, I'd probably say Jonnu, but I think it's a pretty solid tight end core overall. The offensive line does have some issues, but I do think when healthy, your 2 offensive tackles of Teron Armstead and Austin Jackson are good enough. They also are preparing the future of the offensive line with some young guys like Patrick Paul, so I am interested to see how he can develop. I think the offensive line needs some work, so I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video, but I also don't think the offensive line is that big of a negative. Moving on to the defense, I think this defense is pretty awesome in a lot of different positions. We'll start off with the defensive line. They did take a hit losing Christian Wilkins in free agency, so I do think that defensive tackle position is a little bit weak right now, but Calais Campbell can come in there and still put together a good season. But I really do like this new edge rushing group that this team has put together. I know this team has some injuries with guys like Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, but we can assume that they're going to come back healthy and great next year as well. But alongside those guys, they did a really good job of kind of shoring up that position. Zach Steeler had an awesome year last year, getting over 10 sacks. Then you added Chop Robinson. Again, I didn't love the pick, but Chop Robinson is an awesome player. And the reason why I didn't love the pick is because you already had a couple good pass rushers, and not to mention, Chop Robinson is a speedster. He's a pass rush oriented guy. He's not going to be that great in terms of stuffing the run. But again, he's Chop Robinson. I kind of understand it. Then you also added Shaquille Barrett and Mo Kamara. I was very high on Mo Kamara, so I'm extremely interested to see what he can do for this team this year. You want to talk about a big brawly style guy, that is Mo Kamara. He can definitely do that. But I think all in all, your defensive line, maybe outside of maybe like a second defensive tackle, is pretty solid all around. Your linebackers are pretty awesome too. You have David Long Jr., Anthony Walker, Jordan Brooks, and Duke Riley. I'm very excited to see how they orient those different guys all around this season, who gets the starting job, who gets more plays, all that sort of stuff. But I think the linebacking room is very fun and gives you a lot of versatility to work with. But I think the biggest strength of this defense is going to be within their secondary. Your starting cornerbacks this upcoming season are going to be Kendall Fuller, Jalen Ramsey, and Kadir Kaho. Hopefully I said that right. I'm not 100% sure that's how you pronounce his name. Kendall Fuller is a very fun player at times, but it also can be extremely frustrating. He's been with Washington the past couple years, but is a very solid cornerback, and you put him next to Jalen Ramsey, who is an all-pro level guy. You have a pretty good secondary combination right there. And then Kadir has been one of the more surprising players playing in that nickelback position. I expect him to take another step forward this upcoming season. Then you have a safety trio of Jordan Porter, Javon Holland, and Marcus May. Again, I'm very intrigued to see how they rotate those guys in and out, but I do think that is a really solid secondary. You pair that secondary up with some really good pass rushers, I think this defense can actually be pretty solid next year. But let's go ahead and kind of trail back to what I was talking about with the offense. Another compliment that we can give this Miami Dolphins team is going to be Mike McDaniel. His system has just been awesome these past couple years. He knows how to get these guys in the right position to make the right plays, and I do think this offense is going to have another awesome season next year. So in totality, when talking about this Dolphins team, there's a lot of positives, but like every team, we got to talk about the negatives because there are some big negatives happening for this Dolphins team. Let's talk about it. We'll start off with the personnel issues I do have with this roster. We'll begin by talking about the interior offensive line as promised. Isaiah Wynn, Aaron Brewer, Robert Jones, Jack Driscoll, Lester Cotton, and Liam Eichenberg are all kind of competing for the interior offensive line spots. And via ESPN, looking at their depth chart, right now the starters are technically Aaron Brewer at center, Isaiah Wynn at left guard, and Robert Jones at right guard. And quite honestly, I really don't know how to feel about this interior offensive line because on one hand, I do think there is some upside to be pretty decent next year in this system. But on the other hand, I look at what these players have done throughout their careers and I'm just not that blown away. All of these guys are not necessarily great in PFF grading, and when watching the film, I wasn't necessarily blown away with any of these guys. I don't really think this offensive line is bad per se, but it is something to at least keep an eye on. And then, as I mentioned earlier, defensively, the interior of that defensive line is only held by, right now, Calais Campbell. And with Calais Campbell's age, I do think it is reasonable to assume that maybe he'll miss some time or maybe take a step back production-wise. And behind him, you do have some other guys like Neville Gallimore, Benito Jones, Deshaun Hand, Taylor Tart. But I don't really know if any of those guys are of the caliber of really getting any serious playing time. So again, I think the rest of the defense can make up for their lack of size and lack of ability in that nose tackle position, but I do think it is a bit of a concern. But for me, I'm not really too worried about the roster on this team because I think the roster is really well put together. My issue is more, can this team actually get the job done? We'll start off by talking about their schedule because I do think their schedule is pretty interesting. It's pretty easy early on, but then it gets very difficult later in the season. Weeks 1 through 5, they have 5 relatively easy matchups. Of course, there are some tough ones throughout. In week 1, you have Jacksonville. I'll take that as probably a win for Miami. Then you got Buffalo in week 2. Could honestly go either way. Same thing in week 3 with Seattle. I would probably lean Miami, but it could also be a Seattle win. I wouldn't be too shocked. Then you got Tennessee and New England. That Tennessee game won't be easy, but I think it's a revenge game for Miami, so they should be able to get the job done. Then you have a week 6 bye, which NFL, please for the love of God, quit giving teams a week 6 bye. That is ridiculous. But then post bye week, it gets pretty brutal for this team. You have Indianapolis in week 7, which is a game that could go either way, but I'm a big fan of Indianapolis and I think they can get the job done. But I will give that one to Miami because they should be able to be the more experienced team in that situation. Then you have Arizona, that's a win. Then you got Buffalo, the Rams, the Raiders. 3 pretty tough games, but I think of those 3 games, hopefully you can come out 2-1 or maybe 1-2. I think you'll be fine. Then you have New England in week 12. That's not too hard of a game. You should be able to win that one. But then after week 12, good freaking luck. Because then you have the Packers, the Jets, the Texans, the Niners, the Browns, and the Jets again. And if we assume that the Jets are going to be healthy, that is 6 straight games of absolute hell. My look at that is if you can go 2-4 throughout those 6 games, I think that's a relative success. And if you can go 3-3, then hell, that's a really awesome job. But that is an absolutely brutal end to your schedule. And if you just look at it as sort of a bigger picture, if you look past week 6, which is their bye week, you have maybe 3 easy matchups and the rest of them are really difficult. Those 3 easy matchups are against Arizona, New England, and maybe Las Vegas, but Las Vegas could be pretty good next year too. But you got the Colts, that's not easy. The Bills, the Rams, the Packers, the Jets, the Texans, the Niners, the Browns, and the Jets. Yeah, good luck with that, Miami. And the reason why I bring this up isn't necessarily because every team has an easy schedule and Miami just has this brutal schedule. My issue is for this Dolphins team is that I personally do think this Dolphins team has got to win the division this year. If they want to be able to make that deep playoff run like this team has been trying to do, I think they have to get home field advantage. And with this schedule looking how tough it is, I don't really know if they're going to be able to do so. Because in this division, you have the likes of the Bills and the Jets, who are 2 teams that could easily win the division over a team like Miami. And my concern for this is that, okay, let's say Miami doesn't win the division, but still makes another wild card spot. Are they going to be able to make that deep playoff run playing in all those other cities? Probably not. I don't really think that the cold affects this team as much as maybe the media has made it out to be. But at the end of the day, history is history. They have continued to struggle in the cold against teams like Kansas City and all these other great teams. So if you're going to ask me, do I think Miami can reasonably go into another team's stadium in late winter and make a game out of anything? I would probably say no. Because the AFC is stacked. There's so many great teams, and a lot of these teams are playing a little bit more northern where it gets a little bit colder, whereas Miami's typically is a little bit warmer during the winter. So you got to go to another team's stadium where it's probably freezing or really cold, and you got to play them in the playoffs. That's not an easy task for a team out of Miami. I think this team has a lot of really good pieces, but I think with the way this schedule is looking, with the way that this team has looked throughout the playoffs, I think it's reasonable to say that I don't expect much to change. I like this team. I like their quarterback. I like their system. Another year under Mike McDaniel and Tua so they can continue to get better. But we've seen this 2 years in a row, and I understand that one of those years was with an injured quarterback, and who knows how that would have went, but we've seen enough in my opinion. I feel like last year was sort of the nail in the coffin of what this team could be. Because they were pretty awesome throughout the regular season, and then as the season went on, they got worse and worse and worse, and then all of a sudden in the playoffs, you're out in 1 game. And I kind of have a feeling that's how this year is going to go as well. I have a feeling that weeks 1 through 5, they'll probably be 4-1, 3-2, and looking pretty sharp. And then post-bye week, they'll probably look pretty sharp coming out of it, going up against the Colts, Cardinals, and Bills. But then after that, I don't really know what to expect. So for me, I can't really grade this Dolphins team until the season has completely concluded. So, okay, we talked about the goods, we talked about the negatives. Let's actually talk about what I think this Dolphins team is going to do in 2024. And as I've mentioned throughout the video, my biggest issue with this team is going to be the simple fact that their schedule is extremely difficult later in the season. As the season goes on, the schedule gets harder and harder and harder, and my expectations for this Dolphins team are going to probably go down, down, and down. There's a lot of talent on this team, and if this team can stay healthy, they'll make a pretty fun run in the playoffs, hopefully. But my issue is I don't really think this team is going to be able to win this division and get home field advantage for the playoffs. And by them not getting home field advantage, I don't really think this team is going to be able to do a whole lot in the playoffs. So my prediction for the season is that they'll probably win somewhere between 10 to 11 games next year. And I think they'll be a fun team throughout the regular season. But when it comes down to it, I don't think they're going to get the job done. So I don't personally think they're a contender. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. And if you guys disagree, let me know in the comment section below. But I love you guys. Peace.